Hey guys! Today I'm going to be doing a discussion video for The Tyrant's Tomb by Rick Riordan. This book has been out for a little bit, so I should have already read and done a discussion video for this book, but it's been a pretty hectic year, so I'm just getting to books when I can. So I would normally jump into these videos by giving you my non-spoiler thoughts, but this is the fourth book in the series, and I don't really think that I can accurately give many of my thoughts without spoiling something, so I'm not going to really have a non-spoiler section of this video other than the fact that there was things I really liked about this book. There was a couple of things that really irritated me about it, but overall it's still got a 5 out of 5 stars. First, I want to talk briefly about new characters. We don't have many in this book, at least none that are actually, I feel, prominent enough to talk about. Kind of like Don the Fawn. I'm going to talk about him briefly like towards the end of this, but we don't really get to know him that well, so there's really no attachment there. Then we have, also I apologize if I mispronounce any names in this video. That's going to happen. But then we have Tarquin, who is the undead king of Rome. I actually don't know what to call him because he's not really undead like a zombie, but he's like a skeleton that's walking around, and I'm not sure what to call him. So we have the undead king, Harpocrates. I don't know how to say his name either. Harpocrates is the closest I can get to, and the Sibyl, both of them are in states that I wasn't expecting, and I also love that Harpocrates is like an incarnation of Horus. I did read Rick Riordan's Red Pyramid. What is that series called? The Kane Chronicles. I read the Kane Chronicles, and even though it wasn't like, it was probably my least favorite series of his, but it was still really good. It was still a really solid series. And I listened to the audiobooks, which made the experience go so much faster. But I learned about Horus and that, so Harpocrates being an incarnation of Horus, it's not something that like would mean much to a lot of people, but I really liked that inclusion. And then we have Lavina, which I didn't think I would like her character at first because she seemed kind of wishy-washy, especially for a Roman demigod, but she really grew on me, and she really stepped up when she was needed. But those are all of the new characters that I felt important enough to discuss. Let's move on to the actual contents of the book. Now, the beginning of this book, I was dreading from the very beginning because for those of you who read the rest of the series, which you should have if you're watching this video, we start off by transporting Jason's body back to Camp Jupiter. I mean, we would have had to have gone to Camp Jupiter anyways, but the fact that we're having to take Jason's body there as well is just heartbreaking, and I cried less at the beginning of this, but I will say I teared up a bit. I teared up a couple times in this book, but it still almost doesn't feel like a real thing, probably because there was so much time in between me reading the last book and this book, and it could also be the fact that I've kind of tried to block it from my memory. It's like you don't normally get books where main characters die. Even if he's not the main character in this series, he was in another series, and it's hard to believe that Rick Riordan actually killed some of his main characters after Percy went through so much and didn't die. So it really sends my brain askewed from like all of his other series. We've had no, excluding Magnus Chase, we've had no main characters actually die, and then all of a sudden he throws the last book at us, and now we have to deal with the death of a main character, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to do with myself here. I also really didn't like the fact that Thalia still didn't know about Jason. I mean, that was one of the things that I was like most anxious for, and we didn't get that. And even towards the end of the book, we didn't get that. I'll talk about more of that later. Now, there are two missions that take place in the middle of this book, in between all of the other shenanigans that are going on. The first mission we had to find Tarquin's tomb. It turned out not as I was expecting. We got there fairly quickly with little trouble, and it wasn't. The only real problem they had through that entire thing was this scratch that Apollo got from that one demon, and I'm not really sure well, I guess they're monsters and that's not demons, but I can't remember how to say the name, and even if I had it in front of me, I know I wouldn't be able to say it. But he had that scratch that was turning him into this ghoul, zombie, whatever you want to call him, and that was pretty much like the biggest problem we had. If he didn't have that, Tarquin never would have known they were in there to begin with. At least I don't think he would have. Why didn't it heal? I mean, I would really like to know that, because it took Artemis healing him at the end of the book to actually get rid of this. Why didn't, like, normal demigod methods heal him? I mean, how much of his, like, godliness actually had to do with that, and how much was, like, I don't know anything else that actually could have affected it, like, off the top of my head. But I just don't understand why he didn't heal with all of this stuff going on. But I guess it kind of worked in Apollo's favor, because after this is when he actually started, like, getting his godly abilities and strengths back, like his archery, his super strength, at least when he's mad, and, like, the power of his voice, and he could do it without exhausting himself. So that was very nice. So maybe that was the whole reason behind him getting the scratch, you know, story-wise. But at the same time, I mean, there's not a lot of information given on why his, like, strength and abilities and stuff are coming back and not exhausting him. And between this quest and the second quest to find the Silent God, Apollo basically spends a lot of time resting and healing, and I guess we connect to Lavina and a couple of the other characters. I mean, there's a part where she takes Apollo to see the nature spirits and whatnot, and she kind of alludes to having a plan, but doesn't really let us into the fact. But then we have the quest for the Silent God, where Apollo, Meg, and Reyna, and Reyna's 2 dogs, make the trip up to this, I guess, communication tower, where they find the Silent God, Harpocrates. But the journey there, one, I didn't know Reyna could drive. And as old as Reyna is, I mean, she's been alive for centuries. I mean, she was on Calypso's island and everything, which I forgot about until, like, I was refreshed about that, like, later in the book. But I really want to know who exactly taught her how to drive. But before they get to the Silent God, we have Reyna's curse to deal with, which is something that I didn't expect to be resolved the way it was. One, Apollo offering to be Reyna's boyfriend was adorable, but her laughing in his face, I was kind of getting a little upset. I mean, I will admit, at the beginning I laughed. I got a good chuckle out of that, because the idea of that was ridiculous, even though I wanted it to happen. But there was also the fact that she laughed way too long. Like, it was beyond rude to laugh that long about it. It's like he was being 100% heartfelt and serious, and you just laugh in his face. Okay, a few seconds is fine, but to go on for like 5 minutes and then for like an hour later still getting a good chuckle out of it, it's like, no. Can we stop laughing at him? Can we stop? I mean, yeah, Apollo kind of deserves this, but it's like, can we not? Because I was really getting upset about it. And when I say about him deserving it, this kind of comes back to the Silent God, Harpocrates, and how Apollo treated him when they were gods, and not only that, how I can't pronounce his son's name. The healing god, I'm not even gonna actually try to pronounce his name, but the way Apollo treated his mother, I mean, obviously she was pregnant with Apollo's child, even if she was cheating on Apollo, but the way he just had her, like, assassinated, and then he took out his rage, like that wasn't enough rage, on the crows that told him about his girlfriend cheating, and made them from these white dove-like creatures to these black monstrous-like creatures. And it's like, I said crows, they're ravens. Sorry, there is a big difference there. It blew my mind, because when you hear about the gods doing all these horrible things back in ancient times, it really doesn't, I guess, affect you or hit home about what they did until it's actually like staring you right in the face and you're having to actually deal with it, especially when the main character is the god that did it and he's having to deal with it. So I really loved those points of the book, and it made me seriously want to rage at Apollo, but at the same time you can see that he's a different person now. He's changing. But, and this is something I wasn't going to discuss until later, but when he's fighting Commodus and he has his godly strength back briefly to help and everything, and he gets really arrogant and all that nonsense that comes with being a god. It makes me wonder if he actually is going to change when he gets his godly powers back, or if he's going to turn back into the arrogant asshole that we had before. I mean, the end game has to be him, you know, going back to being a god. I mean, that's the whole point of gods existing. And even Apollo admits when they find the Silent God, and the Silent God and the Sibyl give up their lives so that they can finally rest in peace. And I don't see Apollo giving up godlyhood just because he doesn't understand, like, the whole, you know, you can live for eternity, so why would you ever give that up? I mean, to him it doesn't make sense, even though he's existed for thousands of years and he's been turned into human. Like, I think this is the third or fourth time. I don't know. I know it's at least the third time. But it's like, he's lived for thousands of years, and it's just he doesn't understand that, you know, there are times when it's just, you get tired of living. You know, I kind of got off topic. I was talking about Reyna and her curse and Apollo and whatnot, and then I got mad at her laughing and then just kind of went on from there. So I'll just come back to that later. After we get all the ingredients for the summoning spell, we have to book it back to Camp Jupiter in Friday traffic. I believe it's Friday traffic. And of course, Apollo is going to crash their vehicle like he did at the beginning of the book. Because have you noticed that there's a lot of moments where it's like they do something at the beginning of the book and you can pretty much expect that thing to happen towards the end of the book? Kind of like a nostalgia trip. Even though it's only like been a week for them, it's like you spend so much time in this book that it actually feels like a good amount of time has passed since the first car wreck. So obviously we need a second one. Leah Opima. That was probably horribly mispronounced. I took Latin for 2 years in high school, but that was a long, long time ago. But that basically means single combat. And even though this didn't happen this way, we have Commodus and Caligula. And this is where we really see that Apollo's gotten his strength back, because his bow has been snapped, his ukulele has been crushed, and at this point, his strength is all he has. So before this fight, we're introduced to these two Pegasus that have been tortured and mutilated in the worst ways you can do to a Pegasus. I'm not a sensitive person normally. Like, in a lot of situations, I'm usually very analytical about things. I like to think things out. I don't like to get all emotional in situations, even if they call for it. Mainly because I can't afford to. Because of anxiety problems, I just cried and cried and cried. I mean, it probably took me about a few minutes to get back to the book before I was still tearing up as I was reading it, and I was just so angry. So when this fight happened, and we pretty much knew it was going to end, which this is the fourth book in the series, there's only one more left, so I pretty much knew that the two emperors were going to have to die. I mean, it just has to happen. I mean, there's no way we can go into the final book and it be this length and we have to deal with 3 emperors and a python. It wasn't going to work out. So these two needed to die. It was just the how they were going to die that was the tricky part. Which, let me just say this, Rick Riordan, can you please stop making my heart stop? Poor, lovable, squishy Frank. I know he's not squishy, but I imagine him with the baby face and everything and just pinching his cheeks. So that's where I get squishy from. That wasn't okay. We went through pages and pages thinking that Frank was dead. That he burnt his lifeline in that piece of wood to kill the emperors. And Apollo couldn't even hobble Commodus enough to where he would actually burn. Nope, he crawls on out. Oh my god, Frank. I teared up a little bit. It was one of those moments where, okay, this death happened, but we can't take the time to grieve. We have to just push on through and go on with it. And at this point, I was really invested and I needed to just keep reading. The Pegasus, the action hadn't really started yet, so I could take the time to cry. Frank, I was like, I'll just have to wait on you. I was like, it's going to be a Jason deal. I'm probably just going to push it out of my mind like it never happened. And then we had Apollo. I think it even says in the book that Apollo had never, like, incinerated, killed, whatever you want to call it. He has never done that with his voice before. And he was just so infuriated by what had happened with the Pegasus and what had happened with Frank, and the fact that Commodus was still trying to destroy Camp Jupiter after all of that he literally incinerated him with his voice. And it was an amazing display of power, but it was also one of those frightening moments. I actually skipped a lot now that I'm thinking of it, but when they were on their way back after that second car wreck, Rhaena breaks her leg and Lavina shows up with her fauns and druids and stuff, and she actually puts Rhaena to sleep and takes her off somewhere safe so she can heal and whatnot. But when we get back to camp and Apollo has to do like the summoning spell, one, I find it hilarious that he has to read the spell out of Tyson's armpit. It's very, very funny. But also I don't know, it's said that they wouldn't go into the incantation or whatever because it's like, you don't need to summon Artemis. This is a thing that you really shouldn't do. And it's like, where are we going to find the last breath of a god? We can know the incantation. We're not going to be able to find the ingredients for it. So I was kind of a little upset that it didn't go into the mumbo jumbo of everything he was having to say and do. But whatever. Then there was the whole, like, her not showing up, like, right away. It's like, getting the Silent God's last voice, cutting him free and everything, opened up the communication for all demigods. That was the entire problem. So now, like, all the communication features are, like, slowly coming back, and it's like an expansion kind of thing. It's where it starts at a certain point and, like, it gradually gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you would think it would just be one of those things where, you know, you fix the problem, so now all of it's back. But it's a very slow moving thing, and we learn this when Apollo makes a call to Frank via the holographic scroll, which bursts into flame because it's getting overheated from, like, trying to stay connected. So the summoning spell doesn't right away summon Artemis, simply because of the communication features. Even this summoning spell, it takes time to, like, filter through. But this summoning spell and everything happens before Apollo can go and help Frank deal with the Emperors. And on the way there's like a whole bunch of fighting I'm not really going to go into. There's also a lot of deaths that I'm not going to go into because only like a few of the deaths are named, and it's like the Camp Jupiter has lost so many people, it's not even funny. But once everything is settled down enough for people to actually think, Apollo comes to the conclusion that Tarquin is going after Ella and Tyson, and that leads him to going to the bookstore, because at this point Tarquin doesn't know that the Sibylline books are not books, so you would obviously look in a library or a bookstore to find books. So our final fight is happening inside a bookstore, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially since all the zombies were like either eating the book, Great Expectations, nice book to eat, keep you full, or they were actually reading, which I was like, I don't know how I feel about these zombies actually having like the brain power and personality to actually pick up books and read, and how they didn't even want to stop reading when it was time for them to go into battle. And it's like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I kind of like it and I kind of don't. But through all this, Apollo's scratch and infection is getting worse and worse and worse. It started getting like a real jump start when they went to Tarquin's tomb. It was kind of like supercharging it, so it'd work at double speed, even with all the healing and stuff that was happening. So we spent a lot of this time with Apollo just sleeping and resting and being poisoned. But this is the point where Diana / Artemis finally shows up, just in time to slay Tarquin when Hazel couldn't technically do it with the weapon. I don't know why Hazel couldn't just kill him. I mean, Diana just shot him with an arrow. You would think shoving a sword through him would have done the exact same thing, but apparently not. Maybe there's something special about godly objects that have to kill him. I don't know. Maybe I missed that part. I don't know. I really don't know. Point is that Hazel technically finished him, but he didn't die, and Diana had to come and give him the final killing shot, and she shows up just in time for Apollo to die. Something else, but he's only dead for like all of 3 seconds, so even though it's like a shock that it happens, like at the same time it's like, he's not gonna stay dead. We still have a whole another book and he has so many problems to fix. Although I do wonder if it had been Zeus / Jupiter, if he would just let him die. And can I just point out here that the whole Apollo and Diana like having their little sibling moment, and like in those few moments where Diana can be there is just so incredibly touching, and I absolutely love it. I love the fact that he summoned Artemis. I 100% thought he would like summon Mars or something because it's Frank's dad and whatnot, and this is Frank that's having to go through all this, so yeah, we're gonna get Mars. I mean, I didn't for a second think Jupiter, because even if you summoned him, I doubt he'd show up. I didn't even consider Artemis, but I don't know why, because at the beginning of this I'm thinking we have to have some closure with Thalia, so why wouldn't I think that he would summon his sister? And after this touching moment, Artemis/Diana disappears, and Frank shows up on Orion's back, fully alive and in his underwear, and you know, why wouldn't his underwear burn? It's because it's a PG book is the reason why Frank showed up in his underwear at all. I mean, his Praetor cloak, I can understand why that survived. His underwear, I don't think boxers can survive Greek fire, especially when the rest of your clothes didn't. That was a very interesting concept, that he lived through the Greek fire, and I do wonder if now he's kind of like, is it Cyclopses that can survive Greek fire? I don't know. I know they can survive regular fire, but is this like a thing where he sent his life force like bursting into flame, literally, and now he can survive Greek fire? Is that going to be like a permanent thing, or was this like a one-time deal? But with Frank being alive, there is a lot of other people that didn't make it. Dakota being one of them. He was a very prominent character in the Heroes of Olympus series. He didn't have a big role, but he was one of those memorable characters that really stood out, mainly because of the Kool-Aid. But he died, a few others died. Jacob, I think, was the standard bearer, which is why I remember him. And then we have Don the Fawn that dies. And he dies in a very, I believe, symbolic way, because he wanted to be turned into a very victorious plant. He turned into a laurel. Is that what they're called? The circlets that go on the victors' heads and whatnot. It's an Apollo. What is it? I can't word today for some reason. It's a symbol of Apollo. Like, this plant is one of his symbols, like so many of the other symbols he has. A lot of people think that maybe, at least a lot of the fauns and druids and everything, believe that Apollo had a hand in this, even though he says he didn't. Maybe in some like unconscious way he did. And the whole reason behind him dying, I felt, was kind of stupid. He stayed behind on one of the 50 yachts that Lavina sabotaged. That way they would throw the Greek fire at the yachts. Why he stayed behind for that, I don't understand. It's like, if there is a malfunction with your malfunction and it doesn't go off as planned, you don't want to be on the ship regardless. So I don't get it. I really don't. He pretty much died for nothing, because the plane went through, but even if it hadn't went through, someone was going to see that. Someone was going to get to that ship and probably killed him anyways. But Lavina's plan was entirely heroic, and I'm actually surprised it was just her, Reyna, and a bunch of druids and naiads and fauns that actually succeeded with this. I was actually glad in the end when she got promoted to the leader of the 5th cohort and Hazel got promoted to Praetor. It's like, I'm not sure that Lavina needed this kind of power, especially since she got those dancing shoes off one of the ships and now she's going to make everybody tap dance in the 5th cohort. Doesn't seem very sensible, but maybe the power won't go to her head and she'll actually mellow out a bit. But if anything good came out of her being in charge, her girlfriend seems to really like people in power. I think Lavina's gonna have to invest in some calamine lotion, because poison oak is not something you want to necessarily get in constantly. And there's a lot of prices to love. What's a little poison oak, right? Okay, now we're winding down to the very, very end of the book, and we have Apollo's discussion with Thalia. I was not expecting it to be done this way. I expected Thalia to show up at camp and demand to know where Jason is, and just having this big heart-to-heart with her, and then her flying into a rage. Because if I was her, I would fly into a rage too. What did we get? We got her telling Apollo that she knew a few hours prior she'd already had all of the anger drained out of her system before they even came, and then she doesn't blame Apollo at all, which I don't think it's Apollo's fault. I don't think he could have done much of anything in that situation to help unless he got his burst of godly strength or whatnot and was able to kill Caligula. But there was nothing Apollo himself could have done to save Jason. So, yeah, it wasn't his fault, but as an angry sister, she still would have blamed him, and it wouldn't have taken just 5 hours of rage throwing things to get it out of her system. I felt like we had a big missed opportunity there, but I also feel like if it had been drawn out or rushed or anything like that, it wouldn't have... The last book of the series is supposed to be the last book Rick Riordan is writing, and if we end with Thalia having some kind of grudge against Apollo, that could make people believe it's going to run off into a whole nother series. So I kind of see why he tied it up the way he did. And I mean, a lot of people may say that, why would we think that that would run into another series? Well, that's because Rick Riordan doesn't leave loose ends. If there's a loose end from the Percy Jackson series that still hasn't wrapped up, 9 times out of 10 it'll wrap up in this book. Because we go back to Camp Half-Blood in the next book. There's just so many loose ends that are left sprinkled throughout his series that will wrap up in other series, or we will get more information to in other series. It's like Percy makes a little cameo in the Magnus Chase series. Annabeth Chase is in the Magnus Chase series. That was sprinkled in as hints in, what was it, was it sprinkled in the Heroes of Olympus series, or was it the actual, I think it was the Heroes of Olympus series, because that's around about the right age. I need to reread the books. Like, all the little details are not like fresh in my mind, but I do remember Annabeth being on vacation, not vacation, but vacation with her family to visit more family because of what was happening in the Magnus Chase. So there's not going to be loose ends. And 100%, this next part really made me mad, because Raina's curse that supposedly Venus gave her and whatnot, that no mortal or demigod will heal her heart. And all of us assumed correctly that it was going to be a god, and that it was going to be Apollo that healed her heart. And we were correct on that front. He made her giggle, and she hasn't laughed in so long that healed her heart. And for some odd reason, this girl that has lived for hundreds of years on a, I can't remember like the first thing she did. Her sister is actually an Amazon. She lived on Calypso's island as a servant. Then she spent some time as a pirate, and then she came to Camp Jupiter to be praetor. And it's like, yes, you may be sick and tired of being in command, but step down. Don't choose another option that's going to lead to immortality or death by hunt. Most likely it's going to be immortality. I doubt the hunters die very often. There's only been one case of it, and that was Artemis's last lieutenant before Thalia took over. But my point is, I hate the fact that Raina joined the hunt. I'm so sick and tired of girls of various ages just deciding to join the hunt. You would think Raina was so old that she would just want to live a regular mortal life, go about her life, find love and everything else, because she never could before. She's never been actually in a relationship, and she just decides, without even trying to be a normal person, to just join the hunt. Now, if she had tried to be a normal human, gone to college, met a guy and everything, and she actually tried being what humans consider normal, at least, yeah, maybe. Like, yeah, join the hunt. You've given it a try, and you obviously didn't like it, go join the hunt. But it just kills me, because Thalia joined for a reason. I didn't mind Thalia joining, because it was either this, or, like, I think that she's a year older than Percy, so all the, like, the end of the world stuff was going to be triggered by her instead of Percy, and the prophecy was obviously about Percy, so something had to happen to make her stop aging, and this was the way it was going to happen. That made sense. I was also a little bit tweaked when I thought that Hazel may join after Frank died, because Diana/Artemis kind of made me feel that way, but I'm so glad that didn't happen, because honestly, I hate that so much. I hate the fact that it's like, oh, the love of my life died, time to go join the hunt, be a maiden forever. It's like, no, there are plenty of other fish in this sea. Please don't do this to me. Thankfully that didn't happen. But the Raina deal, kind of irked me. Again, this is probably one of those loose ends, so no one actually thinks that the Apollo and Raina thing are going to happen, because people were shipping them so hard in the Heroes of Olympus series. So that's probably why this happened. But that was the most prominent thing about the book I just did not like. I mean, it's still a 5-star book, but I just really didn't like it. And then, I didn't go through any of these tabs, by the way. I have tabbed the hell out of this book, which you probably can't see because I did it in yellow. But that was mainly like emotional outbursts and just like marking important pages. There was like nothing that I really like needed to discuss, I don't think. So at the end here we get our next prophecy / stanza from Ella. She's written it on Tyson's spleen apparently, and it says, "O son of Zeus, the final challenge face, the tower of Nero to alone ascend, dislodge the beast that hast upsurged thy place." Apollo goes into how, you know, you get different pieces of the stanza rhyme with other different pieces, and this is basically saying that in the last book we're going to be going on a quest to find these different pieces of stanza. Not sure how they're going to find them, since this first piece was from the Sibylline book, and you'd think if the first piece is there, all of them would be there. So I'm very interested to see how we're going to find the rest of it. And guys, I know this has been a long video. I didn't plan for it to be long, and I also didn't plan for it to be like all over the place the way it was. So I really apologize for that, and I hope that this video was still enjoyable to watch. Whether it was or wasn't, feel free to tell me in the comments. I mean, it's not going to hurt my feelings. That I take criticism in this form very well. If it's criticism about my personality, that's one thing, but if it's about how I'm making videos, I'm completely open to that. If there's something I should change, let me know. I'll be happy to do it. Within reason, of course. There are some things that I obviously can't change, like my background. I move throughout my room in different areas, so obviously I can film somewhere else. This is just an easier place for me to film. As for doing something with my lighting, I can't do much with my lighting. I have 3 lamps on right now, and I have my window open, so the dingy light from outside, it's a very rainy week. But I can't change my lighting and stuff because I work with natural lighting. I can't change my camera because I honestly cannot afford a camera. I can't afford more lighting. I can't afford these things. So if I can't afford it, obviously I can't change it. That's more like the technical side of this. But if it's something with my the content of the video, and I can change it and make it better, that is the kind of criticism I'm looking for. So if you guys have any suggestions or ideas or things you would prefer to see, then let me know in the comments below. I didn't plan to end this video like that, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!